Okay, Dr. Ray, it's the top of the hour.
It is, and it looks like we're over 100 people now, so we know that we'll get more. And Dr. Eric, am I still coming across choppy?
Nope,
I'm okay.
Yep.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's good evening for all of you, and it's good late morning for those of us here in our area of the United States. I'm Dr. Ray Lindley. I'm the Executive Director of Array Global Educational Services, and we are so pleased to be bringing to you these workshops. We've been making them on a monthly basis since last summer, and we have received wonderful responses from all of you about that they're being very helpful. And that's what we're trying to do, is to be very helpful. I'll be pleased to introduce our presenters today in just a moment. But if you have any special questions or whatever, please be sure to put them in the chat box so that Dr. Jake and I can work on responding. This is being recorded, and so we encourage you, for those of you who have other members of your teaching staff or your school who would benefit by seeing this workshop, please be sure to save this recording. It's both on Facebook and on YouTube, and it'll be posted within, I think, about an hour after we finish. So we hope that this is helpful to you. It's my privilege to introduce my wonderful working partner in this whole endeavor with Array Global. This is Dr. Jacob Frankham. He is the Associate Director, and he and I work very, very closely together. We probably talk with each other, 2 or 3 times every day with various issues that come up. We've been very busy, and I'm going to ask Dr. Jake to kind of give you a rundown of what we're doing and maybe what a few things we've got coming up before we introduce our workshop today.
Well, welcome everyone, and good evening to those of you in the Middle East. We're excited to be here. We're excited to be able to support you in these endeavors as you strive to provide the best education that you can during this strange situation that the world is dealing with. Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Ray. Just want to go over a few different things and some great things that are going on with Array Global right now. Even though there's the pandemic going on, we're able to still support and help schools throughout the world. And we do this through a myriad of services. Accreditation, we have some great things going on in accreditation. We have more and more schools joining us, K-12 schools. We accredit international schools, national schools. We're accrediting our first post-secondary vocational and career schools. We're really, really excited about that. And we have our first few distance-based institutions we're also accrediting. And I think that's mainly because in a lot of those countries where some of you are from, the ministries of education are much more accepting of these distance-based institutions. So we're very, very excited about our accreditation. Again, if you're interested in learning more about our accreditation, our services, let us know. We provide certification services. So if you have a great program in your school, a lot of schools like to have STEM or STEAM, and that's what we can come in and certify those specific programs, but we can also come in and certify any other specialized program that you may have. We're excited today to host our consultant, Dr. Eric. He's one of our consultants that we have outlined on our website, and we have a variety of consultants with different backgrounds that can help you at any level or any stage or phase that your school is in. We have some great professional development opportunities. If you want to learn more about that, please look here. We have some online programs, some face-to-face programs. Teachers can get certified. They can learn more about becoming a STEM teacher. There's just so many different things that we can support you in with professional development. We have a Professional Educators Association. If you're a teacher or an administrator and want to collaborate and dialogue with other administrators throughout the world, check this out. Also, awards and recognition, we're excited. We have open right now our Teacher of the Year Award and our Principal of the Year Award. If you're interested in joining that and you're an Array Global school, please go there, fill out the application, and let's get you in that running for that award. We also have a great program, a distance-based education program. We have partnered with an organization out of Switzerland to provide an awesome virtual school that can not only be done completely out of the school at home by students, but it also can be used to enhance and support what teachers do in the classroom. We have a great external assessment that we are providing to schools. It's called Tree Test, and we'd love to be able to provide that to any of your schools. We have partnered with an organization to do this that provides great data at an affordable price to schools. And lastly, we have an academic Olympiad program. We did our first academic Olympiad this past fall, and it went off very well. We're gearing up for our next academic Olympiad this spring and hope that many of your students could join us and learn how to partner with and work with other students and just compete with other students throughout the world. So again, if you do have any questions, anything that we can help you with, Dr. Ray and I and our consultants are standing by and ready to help in any way. Thanks, Dr. Ray.
All right, and thank you. The other thing, Dr. Jake, I was hoping we would mention is the February workshop, the date and the title.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And sorry I missed that. February 20th is our next workshop. It's going to be at 9:00 p.m. Saudi Arabia time. And the title is Using Technology to Improve Students' Performance and Make Learning Fun. And now this can be utilized for technology tools during COVID, after COVID, it doesn't matter. But we have some great presenters, I think. Dr. Ray is going to be one of those presenters. I'm going to be one of those presenters. And one of our excellent consultants, Mr. Ahmed Ali, who's a school administrator, is going to be helping us present on these different topics. So we're really excited about that. Stay tuned, check out our Facebook page, our Twitter page, our YouTube page, and get ready for this exciting workshop.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure for me to introduce to you our presenters today. Since they have the last name the same, you can assume they're husband and wife. You will notice there Dr. Paula Kellerer. She is a superintendent of schools and has many schools and teachers for whom she is responsible. And Dr. Eric Kellerer, who is a professor at Northwest Nazarene University, professor in the area of education. Some of you in both Saudi Arabia and in Egypt might have attended one of the workshops that Dr. Eric did. And we wanted to have Dr. Paula as part of the workshop also. However, at the last minute, because of some crises situations, which happens to school superintendents, I'm sure that many of you are aware of that, she was not able to be part of the workshop. But Dr. Eric and Dr. Paula are going to be our presenters today. We wanted to aim this around things that happen now during COVID-19 and the problems that we're having with schools opening, but be practical enough after COVID-19 that you can use. So their title today is Developing Relationships That Lead to Academic Success. I hope you get that. Developing relationships that lead to academic success. So Dr. Paula, Dr. Eric, welcome. Thank you for being with us today, and the show is yours.
All right, well, I am excited to be here. The only problem with this presentation is I would rather be there with you and having great, big, wonderful meals with you because I enjoy so much your friendship. I see some of the names coming up that we're familiar with, and I'm missing that interaction. So I'm excited to be here. And I know Paula is too. So we'll go ahead. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you, and that will get us started. It's going to be a great journey this morning with you, or this afternoon. I guess it's evening for you, and it's a very cold, icy morning here where we are. What I hope that you get out of this time together are some immediate tools, some immediate things that you can use in your own schools, in your own classroom, and for this next week, as well as into the future. I think these are valuable lessons. Today, we're going to walk through three real important areas. We're going to talk about rocks. And by rocks, we mean adverse childhood experiences, barriers in children's lives that perhaps keep them from learning something. Then we're going to talk about overcoming those rocks, those barriers. We're going to develop some positive student profiles with you. We're going to talk about the difference between deficit thinking and asset-based thinking. And then we're going to end this time together today talking about how to fill your cup. How do you make your own lives and your own teaching and your own administration full so that you have something to give to the students that you're with?
We're going to start with an activity, but we do want to kind of encompass this in a way that helps us understand that during this COVID time, it's impacted both our children and our staff, our administrators, and our parents in significant ways. We each come with our own context. Some of us are impacted because we have folks who have contracted the disease and perhaps have been significantly ill from it. Some of us have moved our schools wholly online. Some of us have modified our schools. There's a significant amount of change that's occurring in our educational environment right now. And in particular, I'm assuming in my district, and it might be similar in yours, our children are experiencing things that they've never experienced before. As we've moved online, we have families that have had to face barriers that they haven't before. And we really are seeing significant mental challenges, social challenges, suicidal ideation emerging in our schools. And so we think this is a really timely topic. It's a timely topic for now, but it's also a topic that exceeds this time that we have as we experience a world pandemic. So we're going to talk first of all about ACEs, but before we begin, we have a picture here of, it looks like a gentleman with a rock in their hand. So we would like for you to look around your work area right now. It's 9 o'clock in your evening. I'm hoping that you're home and not at your school. But if you're like our teachers, you could be at your school, who knows? So find something in your area that you can hold in your hand. A stapler, a cup, a notebook, a textbook, something that you can hold in the palm of your hand, such as this person is holding that rock in their hand.
All right, so we can see most of you on the screen. You need to move and find something in your office. Oh, there you go. Someone has a cup. Keep that in your hand now. You got to hold it in your hand.
And it needs to be in your dominant hand. I see Jacob. I don't know if you're left-handed, Jacob. It needs to be in your dominant hand. So
I got it. I'm in my right hand now. I just don't want to make sure I don't drop any water on my computer.
Yeah, that's great. So here are the rules, and we're going to ask you to do this for just a next few seconds, but here's a few rules. It needs to stay in your dominant hand. You don't get to set it down. You have to hold it. You can rest your hand on your desk or your table, but you may not let go of whatever that object is in your hand. We're not going to talk about that rock for a while. Neither may you talk about that rock for a while. We don't want to see pictures of it right now. We don't want you chatting if you happen to be in the room with somebody else. And if you happen to have to get up to take a break, you need to take that thing with you. It needs to stay in your dominant hand for about the next 15 minutes. Activity 1, keeping it right there. So let's talk about adverse childhood experiences. If you would, in the chat, would you just do a yes or a no if you've had some exposure to ACEs or adverse childhood experiences? Have you studied it before? Have you looked at it before? Is it a term that you're familiar with? So if you could just, you're watching the chat, I know there are hundreds of us here, but if you could kind of give us an idea, it will help us know how detailed to go into this really important subject. So I am not seeing anybody respond in the chat. What we're asking is, this is a topic that you recognize. Would you just let us know that and say yes? Perfect. Some training. Jacob has had some training. Some people have had some experience, recognize the name, but not a lot of detail. Unfortunately, today, we're not going to go into deep detail because we have 45 minutes to cover a lot of things, but we do hope that we will be able to whet your appetite that if this is a topic that's of interest to you, that you'll dig deeper into it. It's pretty current in the educational world of research out there worldwide. Yes, I see a comment here. We all probably need to be very familiar with this. So let's talk a little bit about adverse childhood experiences. This research is actually quite old. It's now approaching a little over 20 years and being available to educators. It really, though, is emerging on the market as we're dealing with more and more children who are coming to us with concerns and issues that are expressed as behavior in our classroom. You may have heard your teachers talk about increased behaviors in the classroom, or discipline, or those kids just don't come like they used to, or they're not as respectful as they used to. Maybe in Saudi Arabia or in Iraq or other places, maybe that's not true. Here in the United States, that's a really common comment that we hear from teachers. When we think about adverse childhood experiences, what we're really talking about are traumatic events that occur in a childhood that somehow impact a child's future. The research on this is really significant in that if a child does have one of these experiences, then we know that it's going to impact significant parts of their life. So let's talk about what the researcher would talk about and say, here are some examples of adverse childhood experiences. There are 8 general areas, but again, as people are researching this topic is growing, and there are other adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, that are being added. First, substance abuse in the home. This ranges from abusing alcohol to, well, I have many children in my school district whose parents are incarcerated because they are abusing other substances, and so they're not in the home. So substance abuse really runs the gamut. Currently, at least here in the United States, we have an epidemic of opioid abuse. So actual legal drugs that people are using in inappropriate ways. A significant one here, parental separation or divorce. This is often a traumatic event for a child. More and more of our homes are seeing restructure, blended separation, and then moving again together. Mental illness in the home. We are actually seeing in the United States an increase in the number of children under 17 who are exhibiting mental illness symptoms, and we're diagnosing them at levels that we really haven't ever seen before. Now, I said United States because I'm really familiar with those, but this actually is an epidemic that's happening across the world. And whether it's not we're just recognizing it for the first time or whatever, but we are seeing more and more children coming to us with issues that are not academic, that are not social, but actually emerge out of mental illness. Witnessing domestic violence, somebody being hurt in their home by another member of their family, suicidal ideation, death of a parent or a loved one. This could be a sibling, this could be an aunt or an uncle, a grandma or grandpa, somebody that's important or significant in their lives. We know that in many of our blended families, there could be other folks living in the house that really aren't related, but play an important role. Parental incarceration, I've mentioned this already. 10% of the students in my district have parents who are absent because they've made poor choices and are currently not in the home because they are incarcerated. Abuse, this is one that actually comes to our mind first and foremost. Psychological abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, or neglect. Sometimes it's the absence of love, the absence of emotional support, the absence of physical. So these are all elements that as a child experiences them, they carry with them as they enter our schools. And whether they're coming face to face and we're in our traditional mode, or whether we're meeting them online across the screen, they have those things that are impacting their ability to learn. There's a lot of research out here currently that says if we as educators don't recognize this, we're likely to be less successful in helping them move forward academically. There are significant negative health outcomes. So as a society, this is really important for us. If children who experience this at higher rates, childhood experiences, negative ones, then later on in life, our society is working with preventing diabetes or talking about addressing obesity or looking at how we remediate substance abuse. A lot of strong research out there, and we noted the researcher on one of the previous slides, the correlation between the number of ACEs and struggles with school. So some of our students who are coming to us, and we're frustrated because they're not there, they're not attending, they're not coming physically, or they aren't jumping online. Maybe their behavior is less than stellar, and we feel like they're not attending to behavior, they're not respectful in the classroom, or they're really struggling with moving forward in their coursework. A lot of the foundations around these behaviors, which are so important for their success in school, can be related to what has happened to them or is currently happening to them. And most importantly, as we look at early childhood education, as our students enter our systems, negative childhood experiences really impact their readiness to be able to learn. We're going to talk a little bit about what this might look like in the classroom so we can identify that. That was like a 30,000-foot overview of ACEs in about 5 minutes. Lots of research, and we do have some references for you at the end if this is a topic that is interesting to you.
So as you participate, I want you to think, I want you to actively engage here in your own lives and think about students that you know in your classroom. If you have even 10 students in your classroom, or say 100 students in your building, if you're an administrator, you are most likely, you have students that have experienced trauma and they respond in different ways. So as you think about this, I want you to put in your mind a student. You don't have to say it out loud. You don't have to write it into the chat, but think with me about one of your students. Because kids in trauma will respond either with a flight, a fight, or a freeze. So think what does that look like? Think about these students that you might have seen. Perhaps flight will look like a withdraw. Do you see that student that will withdraw into themselves? Maybe they'll skip class. Maybe they are daydreaming. There's a sleepiness all of the time. They're avoiding other people, or they're just kind of hiding from you. They don't want to respond. That's a way of fleeing. That's a way of getting away from their trauma in their lives. And that reaction comes in the classroom or in interactions with them. It may not happen. You may not see what's happening at home or outside of the classroom. But what happens when fight? You might think of fight as just, putting up their fists, and that may happen, but there's other ways that fight kind of manifests itself. They act out, they become aggressive in their behavior, or maybe they're just acting silly, like the class clown. It's a way of fighting. It's a way of reacting, or defiance. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do it. You can't make me do this. Hyperactivity. They're always trying to move, they don't want to stop and think and be present because they're fighting the trauma in their own life. They might be argumentative, arguing with you or screaming at you or yelling in the classroom. These are all examples, just a few examples really, of what fight looks like. And I hope as we walk through these, you're thinking about that student that you may have put a label on, but what we're trying to do is talk about what is underlying those reactions. Freeze. Have you seen that student who just seems to be numb, without emotion, or refusing to answer, or maybe they have blank looks, or they're feeling unable to move or to act? I know these are kind of grim pictures to talk about, but this is who we're working with. And what we're hoping, what Paula and I are hoping that you'll see is that underlying these responses are really something that's going on in their lives, something deep in their lives.
So we're going to talk about a young lady, Ziba. She might be a student that you recognize in your classroom. She might be somebody that you hope you never recognize in your classroom. I do want to note in some of the comments right here that people are acknowledging that they're seeing additional behaviors as a result of COVID, being home with their parents, not getting outside and doing those activities. So it does seem to be a worldwide phenomenon and not just a phenomenon in my part of the world. So I'm going to describe Ziba here to you. Let's say that you're a math teacher, you're a 6th grade math teacher, and Ziba has come into the room. And despite what we would expect her behavior to be, let's say that Ziba, you can imagine her rolling her eyes. You can imagine her kind of with a scowl on her face. She doesn't want to address you. She doesn't really want to sit at the table that she's assigned. Or maybe she's joined you online. Maybe she hasn't joined you online and you can't find her. I know that we're doing an enormous amount of home visits because kids aren't showing up. They are freezing, they're fleeing, they're not there in order to participate in their academic. But let's say we have Ziba here, and maybe we're in hybrid and maybe we are seeing half of our kids during the day. Or maybe this is after COVID and they're back in the classroom. Or maybe it's today or Monday when you try to get on and you want Ziba to join you for your math lesson. But she's not very excited to be there. And she is demonstrating that through a number of nonverbal signals. When you ask her to open up her book or to post something online, Ziba isn't one of those who are going to do that. So that's the scenario we're going to talk about. Eric's going to talk about 5 pretty typical responses that a teacher might have.
Okay, so let's say this is your student. Ziba is your student. You've had this experience with her in the classroom, and either online or face-to-face classroom. What is your response? Think about your response. Are you you may even want to write this down because I'd like for you to commit to one of these answers. 5 choices. A, I'm going to offer this student, I'm going to offer Ziba one more chance to get started. After that, I'm going to send that student to another classroom next door. Her behavior is disruptive and must not continue. Is that the response that you'll have? How about this one? Maybe B, invite her to come to your classroom at lunch. Time to talk about class, school, life, or just eat together. Perhaps she'll open up about what is bothering her.
And we can add to this in the world of COVID. Perhaps you're asking her to meet her offline after the class is gone, and you're saying, hey, could we meet a little bit later today and let's just spend 5 minutes talking. So let's expand this to the current world that you may be experiencing that might be wholly online.
And I want to say there's not a right answer to these 5. What I'd like for you to do is commit to what your response typically is. Don't answer what you think I want you to answer. What is your typical response to a Ziba in your classroom? Here's C. Let's send her to the office. You will not tolerate disrespectful behavior in your classroom. If she's not ready to learn, she doesn't need to be here.
I would expand here and say, hey, maybe this is the student that you'd like to drop from your enrollment. Why am I spending so much time working with this student? The student obviously doesn't want to be here. So should we keep the student engaged and enrolled in my classroom?
Well, maybe we could just leave her alone. She's just one of the little squares on my Zoom call, or she's causing problems in class, but let's just ignore her. Let's focus on the other students who who are ready to learn. As long as she's not bothering anyone, she can sit there and scowl. Are you going to respond like D? Or finally, are you going to call a counselor to arrange a meeting? Maybe you need to get to the parents, to get the parents on board as soon as possible, meet with somebody, try to gather resources to answer the questions in her life. So I want you to think about that. Write it down, commit yourself to A, B, C, D, or E.
If you want to drop it in the chat, go ahead and do that. There are many of you who are saying, hey, I've got a couple of choices going on here. Thank you.
Dr. Paula, can I ask you a question? Or Dr. Eric wanted to.
Yeah.
We're getting some comments about students saying they're so bored being online. Does that fit into, do the 5 options that you've listed here, does that fit into some kind of resistance from the student as you're suggesting? I'm so bored with this, I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, I would say, Dr. Ray, that there are a number of reasons that a child might exhibit this. Number one, this is completely new territory for many of them. And for a lot of our students, as they are in a face-to-face classroom, they've had a very specific leader of their learning, i.e. their teacher. In an online environment, we have to begin to teach students to be a little more, take some self-initiative. They have to get up in the morning. Our daughter teaches in an online class. It's an alternative school. She gets to call her students every morning. And when they answer, they are generally still in bed. So Michaela is working with them and saying, hey, get yourself out of bed, go get something to eat, and then join me online. So boredom could be a result of many things. We do have cases in our district where we say boredom or they're not engaged. They're not connected. And there could be a variety of reasons. We're going to talk a little bit later today about some self-care and the importance of physical activity, the importance of working to engage our students in responses, and then the importance of connecting with them personally. So Dr. Ray, I don't know if I answered that question specifically, but yes, boredom and engagement.
Yeah, boredom and engagement. One of the things that we do recognize, though, is that students engage, first of all, at a relationship level. If the teachers are only interested in the topic and getting the topic across, but they're not interested in the student, then the students tend to get bored more quickly. It's not really boredom, it's disengagement. So they're disengaging from a relationship. But if I have a relationship with the student, they're going to want to deepen that relationship through the topic that I'm trying to teach.
So the title of your workshop, Developing Relationships, it really fits in this boredom issue. Because if you have a relationship with that student and try to develop one, it might help with the boredom.
Yeah.
Perfect. I love the fact that it looks like Ziba is sharing an idea of something that they tried in connecting with the student. One of the ideas we'll share later this morning is really about a morning meeting, particularly as we've made transitions to wholly online. So we were face-to-face and now we're going back online. The number one goal and outcome that we've directed our teachers to do is really about connection and relationship. At our elementary, that translates into a morning meeting. And in the morning meeting, and all of the students are gathered, our role really isn't about introducing new content. It isn't about checking on homework. It isn't about presenting a lesson. It's really about trying to engage them, measure where they are. We do a lot of 0 through 5s. You know, what is today like? Today is really not very good. It's a 0. 5, we're doing really well, somewhere in between. So we're measuring a student's readiness to learn and trying to connect with them relationally. And then later that day, we're connecting and presenting the English language arts lesson or the math lesson or the social studies lesson.
So now let's just take a second. How you answered, one of the things about how you answered here, there's not really a right answer, but how you answered these 5 items kind of is indicative of your philosophy about students who are having challenges in their lives. So let's just really quickly, I'm going to have Paula unpack what the meaning is behind each of your answers.
We as classroom teachers are often pretty confident. Maybe our first response when a student is disruptive in our classroom or maybe is disrespectful, we believe that it is a conscious, deliberate action on the part of a student. And so if your response is A, which can be very common, and particularly if we are frustrated and particularly if we aren't well rested in caring for ourselves, our response can be this: I can't deal with it right now. Let's figure out how to move that situation out. But this really tells us that there's an expectation that a student can turn on and off their behavior. And there are times they can, but there are other times when we have to equip them to help them understand how they can manipulate or modulate their behavior. I noticed that many of you mentioned B, which means that you are already deeply thinking about this topic, about building relationships. We do need to address the behavior, but it sounds like you're going to follow up with them and meet with them and try to have that conversation and begin to dig deeper. In C, C is just, she's not ready to learn. She doesn't need to be here. Really similar to D. These are behaviors when we really are saying, hey, my responsibility isn't to help that student learn. We all have large classrooms already. We've got 37 others. We've got 28 others. Why would I need to spend time with this child? Our spending time with this child, our digging into their behavior and why their behavior is as it is really important in demonstrating that we are taking seriously our role in order to help them learn. Many of you combine B with E. And E is simply a recognition that you may or may not have the capacity to deal with everything that could be going on in this child's life. And so I'm hoping that you do have some additional resources to brainstorm together. We do this on a weekly basis in our buildings on Wednesday afternoon, and we start with our grade level teams or our content level teams trying to brainstorm additional resources. Often at those tables are a psychologist or a counselor or a social worker so that we can create wraparound services to support these students.
All right. So as we think about it, one of the things that we want to say is that it isn't an excuse. The ACEs that students come with are not necessarily an excuse to not help them. We don't just say that's why they're not learning, so let's ignore it. We want them to learn.
So we're coming back to the rock in your hand or the stapler in your hand. And I have to tell you, Eric cheated. He did put it down. So I'm hoping, show me, do you have it? Do you still have it in your hand, in your dominant hand? Jacob, do you still have it in your hand?
I had to do some typing. So I did put it down, but I have been holding it up for a little bit. So I hope other people have been able to do it.
You know, that's a perfect example. The rock really is to demonstrate those burdens, those adverse childhood experiences that a student carries into the classroom. So they have it generally in their dominant hand because it impacts every part of their life. And unlike Jacob, who could put his cup down, our children can't undo the experiences that they've had. That rock remains. It's not a rock that we can take from students very generally. We're not going to go back and we're not going to change the reality of their home life. We're not going to change the reality of the experience that they had that is causing trauma. We can, however, help them recognize it. What often happens in my directions, I said, you can't talk about it, you can't post pictures of it. What often happens is we don't want to go there and to talk about it and to acknowledge it. But until we do that, students aren't able to begin to develop coping mechanisms in dealing with it. We shouldn't pity students because they've had adverse childhood And we certainly don't want to group them all together. So this group of kids right over here have something going on. That's not how we respond to them, but we do respond to them by trying to provide safe places, taking them to lunch, meeting them in that 2-minute video conference, pulling them aside, having a conversation, and begin to understand what those experiences are, begin to help them, even perhaps with that rock, put other rocks on top of it. There's a concept out of the Inuit tribe, which is called Inuksuk, I-N-U-K-S-U-K, Inuksuk, and perhaps you've seen it, where there are symbols of rocks on top of each other, which takes something that could have been negative, okay, always negative, but then build something new upon it and grow. And it stands as a symbol that I can overcome what this is. I can find ways to address it. Perhaps, and this is where Jacob can model this for us, I can move it to my other hand for a while, to free up this part of my hand so that I can really access math, that I have a moment where I can perhaps set it aside, maybe move it to a different thing. So what we hope in this time is, and I don't know how many of you did, because not all of you are visually showing it, but our students just aren't able to take what's happened to them and set it aside, which we'd love them to do, because then they could access all of their academics. So our hope in this first section is to really identify the barriers that could live there. Eric's going to walk us through some quick things that we hope that you would be able to do. I think that's next anyway, and to address it.
I see a great question here about what about the rules in the office that if they say we shouldn't be building relationships with students. That may be a rule in your school, but what we're talking about here are appropriate relationships. These are building connections with your students. It doesn't mean inappropriate relationships. We do have to be careful there, and we have to be respectful in all of the things that we do. But now we're shifting to this idea of how to overcome the rocks in students' lives. And it starts with a core belief. It starts with these, at least these 5 beliefs, that we value student differences. No student is bad. We may be seeing bad behavior, but they as a student are not bad. All students want love and understanding. Kids will do well if they can do well. They want to be successful. And then let's get over this idea of the normal student, okay? There is not a normal student. Every student is unique. Every student is an individual, and we want to demonstrate a great respect for those students. So as we move into this idea, I want to think about this understanding of deficit thinking versus asset-based thinking. As we see a problem, as we see a student, perhaps Ziba that we talked about earlier, we can list things that are wrong with Ziba. But let's start shifting our thinking now to what is right about Ziba. What is going positive in her life? What are the resources and strengths that she has in her life? So let's meet Ibrahim. We moved from Ziba into Ibrahim, and now I want to talk a little bit about him. Let's talk about it by interpreting his behavior, okay? Let's think about his behavior. Maybe his behavior is disruptive, all right? So he's disrupting class, he's being disrespectful, he's pushing the student next to him, he's drops his books in the middle of the floor instead of doing the right thing. We have lots of ways to think about that, but I'm going to ask you to reinterpret his behavior. Maybe Ibrahim doesn't know how to ask for help when he doesn't understand. He doesn't really understand how to communicate his needs to you. Maybe his behavior is that he refuses to participate. That flee, that flight that we talked about, right?
Or that boredom.
Or the boredom. Yeah, he's refusing to participate. I'm going to do whatever I can to not get through my lesson today. But what's underlying? How do we interpret that? Maybe Ibrahim doesn't feel confident in his reading skills, and he's a little embarrassed. He doesn't want to ask for help here. He doesn't want to ask in front of his peers because they all seem to be successful. In his mind, everybody else is better than he is. So he's just going to shut down. Or maybe he leaves the classroom or leaves the online environment. Well, maybe we're interpreting that as bad behavior, which it's not necessarily good behavior, but we're interpreting the reasoning differently. Maybe Ibrahim doesn't have a sense of belonging in the classroom. He doesn't feel like he's part of the group, part of this experience of learning.
I have an example of one of our schools very heavily influenced by poverty. 80% of our families meet the definition of poverty under our federal government. And the student wasn't joining us in an online. During one of our home visits, teachers spent enough time to realize that the student was embarrassed of what kids would see behind them on the camera. So the teacher was able to create and shape a background so that the student, when they jumped online, it was a pretty nice background versus the background that, and so the student, we could have believed that the student didn't want to be there, was belligerent in being there, but really what was going on is the student was afraid to share what would be in the background of their home. I'm
Dr.
looking
Paula,
at the time.
Yeah, we're looking at the time.
time.
We have to start
So
moving.
we're going to move, and you will get this really quick. Wanted to spend some time on developing positive student profiles, and we're going to go through this really quickly because of anything that you hear today, we do want you to hear about self-care.
And Dr. Jake will give you these slides.
All right, positive student profiles, lots of things that we can talk about, talents and interests. So you look at Ziba, you look at Ibrahim, and you look at the things that they do bring to the table. And you already know as great educators that you'll build upon those in order to scaffold them to the places that they need to be. Multiple intelligences, and why don't you go ahead, just in case this is not a topic that's familiar to you. Certainly our children and ourselves, we learn in a variety of ways. So we want to remind you to present material and to gauge students in a variety of ways. Academics, even the poorest students, even the student with the least amount of skills has something that we can build on. Those are relative strengths that we do want to build on in order to move them forward. Social skills in our world today, they can either help us or they can hinder us. Everybody comes with some level of social skills. Again, relative strengths, relative weaknesses in building. Family, probably the thing that we have the least amount of control over, but generally there's something there. There is someone there. Or again, relative strength, it could be worse than this. It could be both mom and dad in prison. So there could be other things happening. And then certainly the supports that your building has worked to provide for them. We're going to move really quickly to strategies that they can try tomorrow, and then we're going to move on to self-care.
All right, so here are some things that maybe you just need to take note of and think about tomorrow. But
and the right positive notes has already been listed here. I saw they had offered that idea.
We've seen one of your comments here. So let's think about these things. Display vulnerability. How can you show that you also have some rocks in your life so that your students recognize they can overcome some of that trauma? The other thing is greet students at the door by name every day. As they come in the classroom, they should be called by name by you. That will make a huge difference. Lots of research there.
Yeah, and because I'm a research geek, up to a 20% improvement in academics just by a teacher greeting students by name, asking a few basic questions, and a 9% decrease in behavior. So again, Greeting can happen in the online environment as well. As students come on, I noticed you doing this in the chat room. Jacob was welcoming you. Dr. Ray was having some conversations. You were greeting each other, calling them by name and greeting them at the beginning of the lesson or
Yeah.
coming to classroom.
And then as you see that behavior happening, offer some choices. Can you do this or this? Give them some respect about that choice. Show interest in what's going on in their lives. Write positive notes. We talked about that, even a little sticky note to them. Or a Facebook chat or a chat in your Zoom call. And then a 2x10. This is taking 2 minutes per day with a student for 10 consecutive days. Just 2 minutes to show interest in them, to see what's going on in their lives, and it will make a difference. And then conducting morning meetings with your whole class or with small groups, trying to check in with them. How are you doing? This meeting isn't about the classroom content. It's not about getting through a math lesson. It's trying to check with them, see how they're doing. Conduct, and then help that student tell their story. What is going on in your life?
I'd really encourage you, if tomorrow or on Monday, I guess, when you're back in the classroom or whatever your regular routine is to try the 2x10. So think about that one student that's really struggling or that behavior is really creating a barrier for them and work on the 2x10. We are using it with some of our behaviorally disturbed children, and it is making a huge difference in building that relationship and building the foundation to move forward. So it's taken us 9 minutes before the end of the hour to get to like maybe the most important thing. Eric has given us a picture here of 3 glasses. There's an empty glass, there's a half full or half empty glass, depending on how you look at it, and then a full glass. The work that we've talked about in the first 50 minutes really is difficult work if your glass is empty. It's nearly impossible work if your glass is empty. So although we as educators and teachers often are called to this profession because we want to give and we care for students and we do have that nurturing aspect of supporting students and helping them, until we are whole, until we are healthy, we really don't have the ability to take what's in our glass and fill up another student's glass or a student's glass. So we have some really brief ideas. And if there's nothing else, again, that you take away, think about these ideas. Our district, currently we have Napa School District, so NSD is our hashtag. We have hashtag gratitude, hashtag NSD pride. Those are our 2 hashtags. We're currently in a gratitude moment where it's really hard for us right now. This part of the year, we're 10 months into this. Our district experienced a catastrophic technological failure just 3 or 4 months before COVID hit. So our staff has been in chaos for going on. We are 18 months into it and they're tired. But taking a moment to be thankful, taking a moment to recognize the good in the world. Sometimes we do the hashtag, it's the little things. Someone bought me coffee. Oh, I was able to walk and I saw the sunset. But really recognizing and verbalizing and then sharing those things that we are grateful for, that we do have. Yes, it's hard. Yes, we're working harder than we ever have before as we're doing online lessons or hybrid lessons. But certainly taking a moment of gratitude, recognizing what's going well is really important. We have already referred to this as movement. One of the deficits in our children right now is the lack of the ability. We're behind a screen and we need to get them up and moving. You are behind a screen as well. You need, today, Eric and I are standing behind our screen, which is helpful. I have staff members who join and they're on their exercise machine. You need movement. It's really important to your mental health in order to get up and take care of yourself physically. reflection. In those moments when we are reflecting and our reflection tends to move, let's connect this to positive self-talk, and our reflection tends to move to, I'm not sure I'm ever going to get this, versus I did a little more today. I still don't know maybe how to incorporate this platform, but I'm going to get that tomorrow. I'm a failure. My kids aren't learning, to, gosh, my kids are showing improvement here, or I'm going to attack it differently tomorrow. Celebrations, small, large. If you wait till the large, you may be a long time in between celebrations. So celebrate those things that are small. Celebrate them with your colleagues, celebrate them with your students, celebrate them with your family. And then grace. Grace can often be only in the context of a faith-based context, but really it's a whole lot more than that. It's giving yourself the ability to say, I didn't do everything perfectly today. That's okay. I did what I could do. We are experiencing a 3-day weekend in the States this weekend. My last letter to my staff this week was to tell them to take their 3-day weekend, that their lessons were well enough prepared, that they had their classrooms ready to go. All of our kids come back face-to-face on Tuesday, even though we are right in the middle of a pretty significant pandemic. They are worried. They've been working really hard. The grace, the permission to say, I've done what I can do. It is enough for this day, and tomorrow we'll tackle it again.
I'm going to end our thing with just a proclamation, really, something that I would like you to say to yourself. And in fact, you could say it to yourself every day if you'd like. But let me read this to you, okay? I am the weather maker and the deciding factor here today. I will fill myself up first and keep myself at the center of my work. I will slow down, breathe, look to truly see the value that each human, each child is in my care. When I begin to be overwhelmed, I will stop and check with myself. I will drink water. I will make time to eat and nourish my body. I will build connections with colleagues and administrators. I will acknowledge and celebrate my strengths. I will show and celebrate the ways that I am different. I will get enough sleep. I will create and maintain healthy boundaries. When all else fails, I will slow down and simply be with a student. All because I welcome and love all hearts and minds here. I can create a place where each student belongs. I choose to see students as whole and complex beings. I can create a loving place for these beautiful souls, and I must do it from a place of fullness.
Whether you are wholly online, whether you're in hybrid, whether or not you've continued to have your students in front of you, Eric and I really wish you the very best, not only this coming week as you meet your students again, but in the rest of this year. Thank you. It's been a privilege to share just a moment with you.
Well, and thank you, Dr. Eric and Dr. Paula. We're getting some wonderful comments from people about how successful, how much they appreciate the topic today and your input. May I just suggest, along with you, what you presented today, we're talking about relationships here. You notice we didn't talk about science or math or English or whatever else, because all of those are important. They're not unimportant, but they're a means to do something else. I recall a time when I was working for the government and I was in a particular school district, and I was talking with the superintendent. Perhaps I've shared this with you before, but I think it's important here. So the superintendent was telling me that he had been invited to the 25th reunion of one of his graduating classes when he had been a teacher. And a student came up to him, called him by name and said, you know what? You are the best science teacher I ever had. He said to the student, thank you. Then he told me, I didn't teach science. I taught social studies. But you see, it was the relationship that this teacher built with students that far exceeded anything that the subject matter. Sure, they learned the subject matter. So thank you so much. I remind us too of this. One of the secrets of a teacher's life is to make stepping stones out of stumbling blocks. When we see the stumbling blocks, we can use those situations to make stepping stones for our students. And if you show you care, everything else is much easier. So thank you for this wonderful workshop today, Dr. Eric and Dr. Paula. Dr. Jake, thank you so much. As we have said, it has all been recorded. Dr. Jake has put on the chat box how you access the Facebook page. Of course, it's on YouTube, and we will be pleased to have further correspondence with any of you who would like. You saw Dr. Eric and Dr. Paula's personal email addresses, and I believe you all have the email addresses for Dr. Jake and myself. So thank you so much for this time today, and let's see you on February 20th for our next workshop.
And please